In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a priceless ancient Sumerian tablet vanishes from a locked museum case, leaving no trace but a smudge of dust. Miss Jane Marple, with her sharp eyes and gentle wit, unravels a web of secrets. Nervous curator, gruff guard, passionate historian, and a charming stranger with a hidden agenda. As whispers of a midnight car and a late-night call surface, Miss Marple sets a cunning trap, revealing a thief driven by greed. In just 10 minutes, a clever crime is undone by the smallest clues, proving no secret escapes the keen gaze of an elderly spinster. Chapter 1. The Empty Case. The village of St. Mary Mead, with its thatched cottages and winding lanes, was not accustomed to drama of a grand scale. Its scandals were typically confined to misplaced affections or disputes over garden boundaries. So, when the little museum on the edge of the village green acquired an ancient Sumerian tablet, a slab of clay no larger than a hand, etched with the angular cuneiform of a civilization long vanished, the news sent a ripple of excitement through the community. The tablet, unearthed in a distant desert and loaned by a benevolent collector, was hailed as a treasure. Its cryptic symbols promising secrets of trade and kings from 4 millennia past. Miss Jane Marple, seated in her neat parlour with its chintz curtains and polished mahogany, first heard of the tablet over tea with Mrs. Dane Calthrop, the vicar's wife, whose enthusiasm for village affairs was matched only by her tendency to leap from one topic to another. "It's quite extraordinary, Jane," Mrs. Calthrop said, her eyes bright as she balanced a scone on her saucer. "The museum unveiled it yesterday, and half the village turned out. Mr. Hargreaves, the curator, gave a speech, rather pompous, but you know how he is. The tablet's in a glass case, locked tight, with an alarm and all. They say it's worth a fortune." Miss Marple, her fingers deftly working a skein of pale blue wool, nodded thoughtfully. Her mild blue eyes, often underestimated by those who saw only a frail spinster, flickered with interest. "A fortune, you say? That does tend to attract attention. Not all of it welcome." She recalled a certain auction in St. Mary Mead years ago, when a rare vase had sparked envy and whispers among the bidders. Valuable things, she knew, had a way of stirring restless hearts. The following morning, as the autumn sun cast long shadows over the village, Mrs. Calthrop returned, her usual vivacity replaced by a breathless agitation. "Jane, it's dreadful!" she exclaimed, scarcely waiting to be invited in. "The tablet! It's gone! Stolen from the museum last night!" She sank into a chair, fanning herself with a handkerchief. "The police are there now, and Mr. Hargreaves is beside himself. Inspector Craddock, you remember him, such a nice young man, asked if you might come. He says your way of seeing things is, well, uncanny." Miss Marple set down her knitting, her expression serene but her mind already turning. "Stolen, you say? How very curious." She rose, smoothing her tweed skirt. "I suppose I might take a look. The museum isn't far, and a walk will do me good." She fetched her coat and a sensible hat, her calm demeanour belying the spark of curiosity that flared within her. A theft, she thought, was like a tangled skein of wool. One needed only to find the right thread to unravel it. The museum, a modest stone building draped in ivy, stood at the end of a cobbled path, its windows glinting in the morning light. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of polish and old wood, and a small crowd of villagers hovered near the entrance, murmuring with the thrill of scandal. Inspector Craddock, a tall man with a serious face softened by kind eyes, greeted Miss Marple warmly. "I'm glad you're here, Miss Marple," he said. "This is a queer business. No broken windows, no forced doors, but the tablet's gone from its case." He led her to the exhibition hall, where a glass case stood forlornly empty, its brass lock gleaming but useless. The alarm system, a modern contraption with wires and a blinking light, had been disabled, though how was unclear. Miss Marple bent closer, her eyes tracing the edges of the case. The floor beneath was coated in a fine layer of dust, undisturbed save for a faint smudge, like the ghost of a footprint, near the case's base. "Most interesting," she murmured, straightening up. "Dust, Inspector, is such an honest witness. It hides nothing." Craddock outlined the facts. The museum had closed at 10 p.m., and the theft was discovered at 6 a.m. by the cleaner, Mrs. Bunce, who had screamed loud enough to wake half the village. The tablet, small enough to slip into a pocket, had vanished without a trace. "We've 4 people to consider," Craddock said. "Mr. Hargreaves, the curator, who locked up last night; Mr. Dobbs, the night guard; Dr. Evelyn Price, a historian who was studying the tablet; and a visitor, Mr. Roland Vane, who was here yesterday and seemed uncommonly interested in the exhibit." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already weaving patterns from these sparse threads. She thought of a parlour-maid she had known, who had once pilfered a silver spoon, betrayed not by her actions, but by the nervous way she avoided the silver tray afterward. "I should like to meet them," she said. "People, you know, are often their own worst enemies in matters like these," as Craddock led her toward the curator's office. Miss Marple glanced back at the empty case, its glass reflecting the dim light like a mirror to the past. A stolen tablet, she mused, was more than a loss. It was a challenge, a puzzle laid out for someone with the patience to see it through. And patience, as Miss Marple knew, was one thing she had in abundance. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The museum in St. Mary Mead, though small, carried an air of quiet dignity, its stone walls and polished oak floors lending it a gravity that belied its modest collection. The morning light filtered through high, narrow windows, casting a soft glow on the exhibits, pottery shards, faded manuscripts, and now, most prominently, an empty glass case that had once held the Sumerian tablet. Miss Jane Marple stood before it, her slight figure wrapped in a tweed coat, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles as she surveyed the scene. The case, a modern contraption of glass and steel, stood in the centre of the exhibition hall, its emptiness a stark accusation against the museum's security. Inspector Craddock, ever respectful of Miss Marple's unassuming acumen, stood at her side, his notebook open, his brow furrowed. "It's a baffling thing, Miss Marple," he said, his voice low to avoid the ears of the small knot of villagers lingering near the entrance, their whispers buzzing like flies. "The tablet was here at 10 last night when Mr. Hargreaves locked up. By 6 this morning, when Mrs. Bunce came to clean, it was gone. No broken glass, no forced locks, no sign of anyone breaking in. The alarm system, top-notch, or so they thought, was disabled, but we can't yet say how." Miss Marple tilted her head, her gaze lingering on the case. Its lock, a gleaming brass mechanism, was untouched, its surface unmarred save for a faint scratch, so minute it might have been overlooked by a less discerning eye. The alarm's control box, tucked discreetly beneath the case, showed no signs of tampering. Yet its light, which should have blinked red, was dark. She knelt, her movements slow but deliberate, and studied the floor. A fine layer of dust coated the oak, undisturbed except for a peculiar smudge near the case's base. A faint, irregular mark, not quite a footprint, but suggestive of something brushed or dropped. "How very curious," she murmured, almost to herself. "Dust, Inspector, is such a truthful thing. It settles quietly, but it never lies." Craddock raised an eyebrow, accustomed to her cryptic observations. "What do you make of it, then?" he asked, crouching beside her. She pointed to the smudge with the tip of her umbrella. "This mark, it's not the tread of a shoe, nor the scuff of a careless step. It's too soft, too deliberate. Perhaps something was placed here briefly, or someone took care to move lightly." She straightened, her eyes sweeping the room. The exhibition hall was a single open space, its walls lined with display cabinets and informational plaques. 2 doors led from it, one to the entrance hall, where visitors signed in, and another to a back corridor housing the curator's office and storage rooms. A high window above the case was latched shut, its frame coated in undisturbed cobwebs. Miss Marple turned to Craddock. "Tell me, Inspector, what do we know of the night's events? The sequence, the people involved, every detail matters." Craddock flipped through his notebook. "The museum closed at 10, as I said. Mr. Hargreaves, the curator, was the last to leave after checking the locks and alarm. He says he was at a village council meeting until 9:30, then came here to close up. Several council members confirm he was there. Mayor Whitfield, Mrs. Dane Calthrop and others. He went home afterward, alone. His housekeeper says he was in by 10:30, and the guard?" Miss Marple asked, her voice gentle but probing. "Mr. Dobbs, the night guard. He started his shift at 9, relieving the day guard. He claims he patrolled the building hourly, checking doors and windows. Saw nothing unusual, heard nothing. He took a break at midnight, 10 minutes, he says, in the back room to eat a sandwich. He was back at his post by 12:15. Mrs. Bunce found the empty case at 6, and Dobbs was still here, looking as surprised as anyone." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already sifting through the information. "And the others? The historian and the visitor?" "Dr. Evelyn Price, a scholar from London, was here all day yesterday studying the tablet. She's writing a paper on Sumerian trade routes, or so she says. Left at closing time, dined at the Blue Boar Inn, and was seen there until about 9. After that, she says she went to her room at the inn. No one can confirm her movements after 9:30. As for Mr. Roland Vane, he's a stranger, a tourist who showed up yesterday afternoon. Signed the visitor log, spent a good hour staring at the tablet. Said he's interested in ancient history, but he's vague about his background. Staying at Mrs. Pritchard's guest house. Claims he was out walking last night. No alibi to speak of." Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly, a sign to those who knew her that her mind was weaving connections. "A walker in the night," she said softly. "How convenient, and yet how inconvenient for him that no one saw him." She stepped back from the case, her eyes roving the room once more. The other exhibits, Roman coins, a medieval brooch, a collection of local fossils, were untouched, their cases secure. The thief, it seemed, had eyes only for the tablet. She approached the visitor log, kept on a podium near the entrance. The book lay open, its pages filled with names and times in neat rows. Mr. Vane's signature was bold, almost flamboyant, with a flourish that reminded Miss Marple of a young man in St. Mary Mead, who had once signed his love letters with similar extravagance, only to be found forging cheques. Dr. Price's name was there too, written in a precise academic hand, as was Hargreaves's, noting his final cheque. "A log is only as good as the honesty of those who sign it," she remarked to Craddock, "but it does tell us who was here, and perhaps who wished to be noticed." Craddock nodded, though his expression betrayed a hint of frustration. "The trouble is, Miss Marple, we've no fingerprints yet. The case was wiped clean, not a smudge, except that dust mark you noticed. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. It's almost professional." "Almost," Miss Marple echoed, her tone thoughtful. "A professional would leave no mark at all, I think. This smudge, it's a small mistake, but small mistakes are often the undoing of clever people." She recalled a housemaid in her youth, a girl named Clara, who had stolen a brooch and left a single hair on the dressing table, a tiny clue that led to her confession. "May I see the back corridor?" she asked. Craddock led her through the second door, down a narrow passage lined with shelves of boxed artifacts and cleaning supplies. The corridor ended at a heavy oak door, bolted from the inside, leading to the museum's rear courtyard. The bolt was stiff but intact, and the key, kept in Hargreaves's office, shows no signs of being touched. A small window in the corridor, too narrow for a person to pass through, was also locked. "No way in or out here," Craddock said. "The front door's the only real entrance, and Dobbs swears it was locked all night." Miss Marple examined the bolt, noting a faint sheen of oil on its surface, as if recently lubricated. "Someone has been thorough," she said, "but thoroughness can be a habit like carelessness. We must see which it is." She glanced at the shelves, where a box of cleaning rags sat slightly askew, as if nudged out of place. "And this," she added, pointing to the box, "Mrs. Bunce is a meticulous woman, I presume?" Craddock nodded. "She's been cleaning here for years. Says everything was in order when she left yesterday afternoon, except the usual clutter from visitors." "Then this box," Miss Marple said, "may not be as innocent as it seems." She did not touch it, but her eyes lingered on the faint dust disturbed around its base. "We must speak to the suspects, Inspector. Each of them, I think, has a story to tell, whether they know it or not." They returned to the exhibition hall, where Mr. Hargreaves was pacing, his thin face pale and his hands twisting together. "Miss Marple," he said, hurrying over, "this is a disaster. The tablet was to be our salvation. The museum's funds are so low, you see, and this was to bring in grants, visitors. Now it's gone, and I'm to blame." His voice cracked, and he dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. There, Mr. Hargreaves," Miss Marple said soothingly, her tone that of a kindly aunt. "We shall get to the bottom of this. Tell me, did you notice anything unusual yesterday? Anyone lingering, perhaps, or asking odd questions?" Hargreaves shook his head. "Nothing out of the ordinary. Dr. Price was here, scribbling away as usual. That man Vane, he asked about the tablet's history, but he seemed harmless, just a tourist. Dobbs was at his post, and I checked the alarm myself before locking up. It was working perfectly, I swear it." Miss Marple noted the tremor in his voice The way his eyes darted to the case and away again. "And the council meeting?" she asked. "You were there until 9:30? "Yes, yes," he said quickly. "Mayor Whitfield can confirm it, and Mrs. Calthrop. I came straight here afterward, locked up, and went home. My housekeeper, Mrs. Lane, saw me in." "Thank you, Mr. Hargreaves," Miss Marple said, her smile gentle but her mind alert. She had known a shopkeeper once, a man named Mr. Tuttle, whose nervous manner had hidden not guilt, but a fear of being thought guilty. Hargreaves, she thought, might be much the same, or he might not. Craddock signalled to Mr. Dobbs, who was standing near the entrance, his burly frame filling the doorway. The guard approached, his face set in a scowl, his heavy boots leaving faint traces of mud on the floor. "I've told you everything, Inspector," he said gruffly. "I patrolled all night, every hour. Doors locked, windows shut. Took my break at midnight, like always, but I was back in 10 minutes. Whoever took that tablet must have been a ghost." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to his boots, noting the mud but no trace of the fine dust from the exhibition hall. "A ghost, Mr. Dobbs," she said mildly. "Or perhaps someone who knew your routine. Your break at midnight, is it always at the same time?" Dobbs flushed, his scowl deepening. I'm regular as clockwork. Have to eat, don't I? But I lock the back room, and I'd hear anyone trying to get in." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her tone disarming. "You're a man of habit, and habits are comforting, but they can be noticed." She thought of a postman in St. Mary Mead, whose predictable rounds had once allowed a thief to slip into a house unnoticed. "Did you see Mr. Vane or Dr. Price yesterday?" "Vane was here in the afternoon, staring at the tablet like it was gold. Dr. Price was scribbling, as usual. Didn't speak to either of them. They left before closing." Miss Marple thanked him, her mind turning to the other two suspects. Dr. Price, she learned, was waiting in the curator's office, while Mr. Vane had been asked to return to the museum. "We'll speak to them soon," Craddock said. "But what do you think, Miss Marple? An inside job or some clever outsider?" She smiled faintly, her eyes returning to the smudge on the floor. "It's too early to say, Inspector, but I'm reminded of a girl in my village, a seamstress, who lost a needle and found it only because it caught the light at just the right angle. The truth is, like that needle, it's there if we can find the right angle to see it." As they moved toward the curator's office, Miss Marple's thoughts were already stitching together the fragments of the case. The smudge, the oiled bolt, the displaced box, the suspect's alibis. Each was a thread, and she knew, with the patience of one who had unravelled many such puzzles, that they would lead her to the truth. For now, she would listen, observe, and let the scene of the crime speak its silent story. Chapter 3. The Curator's Burden. Miss Jane Marple stepped into the curator's office, a cramped room at the rear of the St. Mary Mead Museum, its walls lined with sagging bookshelves and a single window overlooking the courtyard. The air smelled faintly of ink and old paper, and a cluttered desk bore stacks of correspondence, a chipped teacup, and a photograph of the Sumerian tablet in its former glory. Mr. Hargreaves, the curator, sat hunched in a worn leather chair, his thin frame seeming to shrink under the weight of the morning's calamity. His face, lined and pale, twitched with a nervous tic as he rose to greet Miss Marple and Inspector Craddock, his hands fluttering like startled birds. "Oh, Miss Marple, Inspector, it's a catastrophe," he said, his voice quavering. "The tablet, our greatest treasure, gone. The museum will never recover. I'll be ruined, utterly ruined." He sank back into his chair, dabbing his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief. Miss Marple settled into a chair opposite, her posture prim, but her eyes keen, missing nothing. "There, Mr. Hargreaves," she said, her tone soothing, yet laced with that gentle insistence that coaxed truths from the reluctant. "It is a dreadful thing, but we shall do our best to set it right. Tell me, if you will, everything you did yesterday, from the moment the museum opened until you locked up." Hargreaves blinked rapidly, his fingers twisting the handkerchief. "Well, I arrived at 8, as always. The museum opened at 9, and we had a fair number of visitors, more than usual because of the tablet. Dr. Price was here most of the day, sketching and taking notes. That man, Mr. Vane, came in the afternoon, asking questions about the tablet's history. Nothing unusual, I thought, just curiosity." Miss Marple nodded, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "And Mr. Dobbs, the guard, did you speak with him?" "Oh, yes," Hargreaves said. "He was at his post when I arrived, and we exchanged a few words about the weather. Dreadful fog last night, you know." He seemed his usual self, a bit gruff but reliable. I checked the exhibits at closing, as I always do. The tablet was in its case, the alarm set, the lock secure. I left at 10, after the council meeting. Inspector Craddock, standing near the door, flipped open his notebook. "You were at the council meeting until 9:30, correct? And then you came straight here." Yes, Hargreaves said, his voice rising slightly. "I walked from the village hall. It's not far, you know. I checked the case, set the alarm, and locked the front door. Then I went home. Mrs. Lane, my housekeeper, can confirm I was in by 10:30. She made me a cup of tea before I retired." Miss Marple's eyes lingered on Hargreaves's hands, noting the faint tremble as he clutched the handkerchief. She thought of a vicar she had known in her youth, a man named Mr. Pemberton, who had fidgeted in much the same way when questioned about a missing collection plate. Not because he was guilty, but because he feared suspicion. "The alarm, Mr. Hargreaves," she said softly. "You're quite certain it was working when you left?" "Absolutely," he replied, though his eyes darted to the side, avoiding hers. "I tested it myself. It's a modern system, installed just last year. You press a button, and it beeps to confirm it's active. It beeped, I'm sure of it." "Most interesting," Miss Marple said, her tone mild but her mind alert. "And did anyone else have access to the alarm? A code, perhaps? Or a key?" Hargreaves shook his head vigorously. "Only me. The code is kept in my safe, and I change it monthly. Dobbs knows the front door key, but not the alarm. Dr. Price and Mr. Vane, they're outsiders. They wouldn't know a thing about it." Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. "You mentioned the museum's finances earlier, Mr. Hargreaves. You said the tablet was to bring in grants and visitors. Were things very dire before its arrival?" Hargreaves's face flushed, and he shifted in his chair. "Well, yes, I suppose. Small museums like ours struggle, you know. We rely on donations and the occasional grant. The tablet was a godsend, a chance to put St. Mary Mead on the map. Without it, he trailed off, his tic more pronounced. But I'd never do anything to jeopardize it. It was my legacy." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her smile reassuring. "You've worked so hard for the museum. It must be a great strain." She paused, her eyes softening. "Did you notice anything odd yesterday? A visitor who lingered too long, perhaps? Or a question that seemed out of place?" Hargreaves frowned, his brow creasing. "Well, now that you mention it, Mr. Vane did ask about the tablet's value. Not in so many words, but he wanted to know if it was insured, which struck me as odd for a tourist. Dr. Price was protective of it too. She got quite cross when I suggested limiting her time with it. Said her research was vital." Miss Marple nodded, filing away these details. She thought of a grocer's wife in St. Mary Mead, Mrs. Finch, who had once grown defensive when asked about her accounts, not because she was dishonest, but because she feared scrutiny. Hargreaves's agitation, she suspected, might stem from a similar fear, or perhaps something more. "And the council meeting," she said. "Was there anything discussed that might relate to the museum?" Hargreaves hesitated, his fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "Nothing specific. Just the usual talk. Village repairs, the fete. I did mention the tablet, of course. Everyone was excited about it. Mayor Whitfield even suggested a special exhibition to draw more visitors." "Thank you, Mr. Hargreaves," Miss Marple said, rising. "You've been most helpful. We shan't keep you longer." As Craddock opened the door, she glanced back at the curator, noting the way he sagged in his chair, as if the weight of the theft pressed harder than he let on. Outside the office, Craddock turned to her. "What do you make of him, Miss Marple?" "He's a bundle of nerves, but that's not unusual for a man in his position." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. "He is nervous, Inspector, but nervous people are often nervous for a reason. It may be guilt, or it may be fear of blame. Mr. Hargreaves reminds me of a schoolmaster I once knew, who trembled when asked about a missing book, not because he took it, but because he'd lent it to a friend and feared discovery. We must see what lies behind Mr. Hargreaves's tremors." They returned to the exhibition hall, where the empty case stood like a silent sentinel. Miss Marple paused, her gaze settling once more on the faint smudge in the dust. It was not talcum, as she would later discover, but at this moment it intrigued her. A small anomaly in an otherwise orderly scene. "Inspector," she said, "might we have a word with Mrs. Bunce, the cleaner? She found the theft, and those who find things often see more than they realize." Craddock nodded, signalling to a constable to fetch Mrs. Bunce, who was waiting in the entrance hall. She was a stout woman in her 50s, her apron crisp, and her face flushed with the excitement of being involved in such a drama. "Oh, Miss Marple, Inspector," she said, bustling forward. "It's awful, isn't it?" "I came in at 6 like always, to sweep and dust. I went to the case first, it's the pride of the place, you know. And there it was, empty. I screamed, I did. Woke Mr. Dobbs, who was dozing in his chair, poor man." Miss Marple smiled kindly. "You're very observant, Mrs. Bunce. Did you notice anything out of place when you arrived? Anything at all, no matter how small?" Mrs. Bunce frowned, her hands smoothing her apron. "Well, now you ask. The back corridor door was ajar, just a crack. I thought Mr. Dobbs must have left it open during his rounds, but he said he hadn't. And the rags in the storage box, they were a bit mussed, not neat like I leave them. I tidied them up before I noticed the case." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened, though her expression remained gentle. "The rags, you say? How very interesting! And the dust near the case? Did you sweep there before the police arrived?" "No, ma'am," Mrs. Bunce said. "I didn't touch a thing once I saw the case empty. I ran straight to fetch Mr. Dobbs, and then called the police." "Thank you, Mrs. Bunce," Miss Marple said. "You've been most helpful." As the cleaner bustled away, Miss Marple turned to Craddock. The corridor door ajar, the rags disturbed. These are small things, but small things matter. Like a dropped stitch in a shawl, they can unravel the whole pattern. Craddock rubbed his chin. "You think someone used the back corridor. But the door was bolted from the inside, and the keys still in Hargreaves's safe." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, "but bolts can be oiled, and keys can be borrowed. We must learn more about our other suspects. Dr. Price and Mr. Vane. They were both near the tablet yesterday. And both, I suspect, have stories that may not align perfectly with their words." As they prepared to interview Dr. Price, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to Hargreaves's nervous tick, his insistence on the alarm's perfection, and the faint smudge in the dust. She recalled a young curate in St. Mary Mead, who had once hidden a minor lapse by over-explaining his actions, only to reveal more than he intended. Hargreaves, she thought, was hiding something, not necessarily the theft, but a detail, a fear, a moment of carelessness that gnawed at him. The truth, she knew, lay in the spaces between what people said and what they left unsaid, and she was determined to find it. Chapter 4. The Guards' Vigil, the exhibition hall of the St. Mary Mead Museum, with its high windows and polished oak floor, seemed to hold its breath as Miss Jane Marple and Inspector Craddock prepared to interview the next suspect. The empty glass case, its lock gleaming mockingly, stood as a silent reminder of the theft that had shaken the village. The faint smudge in the dust near the case lingered in Miss Marple's mind, a small but insistent clue, like a misplaced stitch in a carefully knitted scarf. She followed Craddock to the small anteroom near the entrance, where Mr. Dobbs, the night guard, awaited them, his burly figure slouched against the wall, his face set in a scowl that seemed as much a part of him as his heavy boots. Mr. Dobbs was a man of middle age, broad-shouldered and weathered, with hands calloused from years of manual labour, before he took up the quieter, if less lucrative role of museum guard. His uniform, slightly rumpled, bore traces of mud on the cuffs, and his bloodshot eyes suggested a night of little sleep, though whether from vigilance or negligence was yet to be determined. As Miss Marple and Craddock approached, he straightened, his expression wary but not hostile, like a dog guarding a bone it half expected to lose. "Good morning, Mr. Dobbs," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle, almost grandmotherly, though her eyes were sharp as they took in his stance, his muddied boots, and the faint flush creeping up his neck. "It must have been quite a shock, finding the tablet gone this morning." Dobbs grunted, folding his arms across his chest. "Didn't find it myself, ma'am. That was Mrs. Bunce, screeching like a banshee at 6. I was at my post, checking the front door, when she came running. Thought the place was on fire at first." Inspector Craddock, standing with his notebook at the ready, nodded. "Let's go over your night, Mr. Dobbs. You started your shift at 9, correct? Walk us through it step by step." Dobbs shifted his weight, his boots scuffing the floor. "Aye, 9 o'clock, like always. Took over from Tom, the day guard. He said it had been a busy day. Folk coming to see that tablet? I did my first round at 9:30. Checked the doors, windows, all secure. Mr. Hargreaves was still here, locking up. He left about 10, and I was alone after that. Did rounds every hour, same as always. Didn't see nothing odd. Didn't hear nothing. Took my break at midnight. Sandwich and a cuppa in the back room. 10 minutes, no more. Back at my post by 12:15. Next thing I know, Mrs. Bunce is hollering. Miss Marple tilted her head, her hands clasped neatly over her umbrella. Your rounds, Mr. Dobbs. Do you follow the same path each time? The same order? The same rooms? Dobbs blinked as if the question surprised him. Well, I suppose. Start at the front door, check the exhibition hall, then the back corridor, the office, the storeroom, same every night. Why do you ask? Oh, no reason, Miss Marple said, her smile disarming. I find routines so comforting, don't you? But they can be noticed by others, can't they? Like the milkman in my village, who always delivers at 7 sharp. Everyone knows when to expect him. She thought of a poacher she had once known, a sly fellow named Jem, who had timed his thefts to the milkman's predictable rounds. And your break at midnight, it's always at that hour. Dobbs's flush deepened, and he rubbed the back of his neck. Aye, give or take. I lock the back room when I'm in there, and I'd hear anyone trying to get in. Front doors locked, back doors bolted. No one could have got past me. Miss Marple's eyes flicked to his boots, noting the mud, but no trace of the fine dust from the exhibition hall. Of course, she said, you're very thorough, I'm sure. Did you see Mr. Hargreaves when he locked up? Or perhaps Dr. Price, or Mr. Vane earlier in the day? Hargreaves was fussing with that alarm like he does, Dobbs said. Saw him leave at 10. Dr. Price was here all day, scribbling in her notebook, didn't say much. That Vane fellow, he was poking around the tablet case in the afternoon, asking daft questions about how old it was. Seemed a bit too nosy, if you ask me, but I didn't think much of it. Both of them were gone by closing. And during your rounds, Miss Marple continued, did you check the alarm itself? Or the case? Dobbs shook his head. That's Hargreaves's job. I just make sure the doors and windows are secure. The alarm's got a light that blinks when it's on. I saw it blinking at 10 when Hargreaves left. Most interesting, Miss Marple said, her tone as mild as ever. She recalled a gardener in St. Mary Mead, a man named Mr. Hodge, whose predictable tea breaks had allowed a neighbour's boy to sneak into his shed and borrow tools for mischief. Habits, she knew, were the scaffolding of daily life, but they could also be a ladder for a thief. And the back corridor door, Mrs. Bunce said it was ajar this morning. Could you have left it open during your rounds? Dobbs's scowl returned, more defensive now. No, ma'am. I check that door every round. It's bolted from the inside, and I didn't touch it. If it was ajar, someone else must have done it. Craddock made a note, his expression thoughtful. You mentioned your break in the back room. Did you lock the front door before going there? Aye, Dobbs said firmly. Always do, and I check it when I come back. It was locked tight at 12:15, I swear it. Miss Marple nodded, her mind turning over the details like pieces of a quilt. The bolted back door, the oiled bolt, the disturbed rags in the storeroom. The smudge in the dust, all were threads, and she sensed they were beginning to form a pattern. Thank you, Mr. Dobbs, she said. You've been most helpful. It's a trying time, I know. but we shall sort it out." As Dobbs shuffled back to his post, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. "He's a straightforward sort, isn't he? Not the sharpest, but I don't see him pulling off a theft like this. Disabling an alarm, picking a lock, it's too clever for him." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her eyes twinkling faintly. "But straightforward people can be used, Inspector. Like a delivery boy in my village who carried a package he didn't know was stolen because he trusted the sender. Mr. Dobbs's routine is so fixed, anyone watching him could plan around it. That midnight break, for instance, it's a window, however small." Craddock frowned, glancing at his notebook. "You think someone timed the theft for his break? But the alarm was on when Hargreaves left, and Dobbs saw it blinking. How could anyone get in without setting it off?" Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. "That, Inspector, is the question. The alarm is modern, but modern things are not always infallible. I once knew a shopkeeper who installed a new lock, only to find it could be opened with a hairpin if you knew the trick. We must learn more about this alarm, and about those who were near it yesterday." They returned to the exhibition hall, where the empty case seemed to mock their efforts. Miss Marple paused, her gaze settling on the faint smudge once more. It was not a footprint, she was certain now, but perhaps the trace of something else. A glove, a cloth, a tool used to pry or conceal. She thought of a seamstress in St. Mary Mead, a girl named Lily, who had once left a smudge of chalk on a stolen bolt of fabric, a tiny mark that led to her undoing. "We must see Dr. Price next," she said, "and Mr. Vane. Their stories will add to our pattern, I think." As Craddock sent for Dr. Price, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to Dobbs's bloodshot eyes, his defensive tone, and the mud on his boots. He was a man of habit, reliable but perhaps too predictable, and predictability, she knew, was a thief's greatest ally. The smudge, the ajar door, the oiled bolt, these were not accidents, but signs of a careful hand. Whether that hand belonged to Dobbs or another, she could not yet say, but she felt the truth drawing closer, like a shadow cast by the light of her patient observation. Chapter 5. The Historian's Passion. The curator's office in the St. Mary Mead Museum, with its cluttered desk and shelves groaning under the weight of dusty tomes, seemed to shrink as Dr. Evelyn Price entered, her presence filling the room with an intensity that bordered on palpable. She was a woman in her early 40s, tall and angular, with sharp grey eyes that gleamed with a scholar's fervour behind wire-rimmed spectacles. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her tweed suit, though well cut, bore faint creases from hours bent over her work. In her hand she clutched a leather notebook, its pages bristling with scraps of paper and penciled notes. Miss Jane Marple, seated primly in a straight-backed chair, observed her closely, noting the taut line of her jaw and the way her fingers tightened around the notebook, as if it were a talisman against the chaos of the morning's events. Inspector Craddock stood by the window, his notebook open, his expression one of polite but firm inquiry. "Dr. Price," he began, "we're trying to piece together what happened last night. You were here studying the tablet yesterday, I understand. Could you walk us through your day?" Dr. Price sat, her posture rigid, and opened her notebook, though she did not glance at it. "Of course, Inspector," she said, her voice crisp with a trace of impatience. I arrived at the museum at 9, shortly after it opened. I've been studying the tablet for my research on Sumerian trade routes. It's a remarkable piece, one of the few intact records of merchant transactions from the 3rd dynasty of Ur. I spent the day sketching its inscriptions and cross-referencing them with my notes. I left at closing time, 10 o'clock, and went to the Blue Boar Inn for dinner. I was there until about 9:30, then retired to my room. Miss Marple's eyes, mild but piercing, rested on Dr. Price's face. "You must be very dedicated to your work, Doctor." "Price," she said, her tone gentle, almost admiring. "To spend so many hours with one small tablet. It reminds me of a dear friend, Miss Hartnell, who would spend days deciphering old parish records, quite lost in her passion. Did you find the tablet as fascinating as you hoped?" Dr. Price's eyes flickered, a spark of fervour igniting. "Fascinating. It's irreplaceable, Miss Marple. The inscriptions detail grain shipments to a temple in Lagash. Specific quantities, names, even a reference to a merchant seal. It's a window into a world we barely understand. Losing it's a tragedy for scholarship." Her voice trembled, not with tears but with a fierce intensity, and her fingers tightened on the notebook until her knuckles whitened. Miss Marple nodded, her expression sympathetic. "A tragedy indeed. And you were sketching it, you say? Did you handle the tablet at all, or was it always in its case?" Dr. Price's lips pursed slightly, as if the question irked her. "It was in the case, of course. Mr. Hargreaves is very particular about it, only he has the key. I worked through the glass, using a magnifying lens. It's not ideal, but I managed. He even complained about the time I spent, as if my research were a nuisance." A note of bitterness crept into her voice, and she glanced away toward the window. Inspector Craddock made a note. "You left at 10, with Mr. Hargreaves? Did you see him set the alarm?" "Yes," Dr. Price said, her tone brisk again. "He fussed with it, as he always does. Press the button, and the light blinked red. I left through the front door, and he locked it behind me. I walked straight to the inn. The innkeeper, Mr. Willis, can confirm I was there for dinner." "And after dinner?" Miss Marple asked, her voice soft but insistent, like a needle threading through fabric. "You went to your room, you said. Did you stay there all night?" Dr. Price hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes, of course. I was tired after a long day. I worked on my notes until about 11, then went to bed. I had no reason to go out." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, but her mind was alert. She thought of a librarian in St. Mary Mead, a Miss Carver, who had once claimed to be reading late into the night, only to be seen slipping out to meet a suitor. Passion, Miss Marple knew, could drive people to unexpected actions, and Dr. Price's passion for the tablet was evident. "You must have been disappointed," she said, "to have only one day with the tablet before it vanished. Did you speak to anyone about it yesterday? Mr. Vane, perhaps, or Mr. Dobbs?" Dr. Price's expression hardened. "Mr. Vane, that dilettante? He was hovering around the case in the afternoon, asking foolish questions, how old it was, what it was worth. I told him it was priceless, but he seemed more interested in its market value than its history. I barely spoke to Dobbs. He's not one for conversation. Hargreaves was the only one I dealt with, and even he was difficult, always fretting about the tablet's safety." Miss Marple nodded, her hands resting lightly on her umbrella. "And did you notice anything unusual yesterday? A stranger in the museum, perhaps, or something out of place?" Dr. Price frowned, her fingers tapping the notebook. "Nothing specific. The museum was busier than usual, village folk mostly, gawking at the tablet. There was a moment in the afternoon when the lights flickered, but Hargreaves said it was just the old wiring. Otherwise, everything seemed normal." Craddock glanced at Miss Marple, then back at Dr. Price. "The lights flickered? What time was that?" "Around 3, I think," Dr. Price said. "It was brief, just a second or two. I was sketching and barely noticed." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. "How curious. Old wiring can be so unreliable, can't it? Like the church hall in my village, where the lights would dim whenever the kettle was on." She thought of a burglary at that same hall, where a flickering light had distracted the verger while a thief slipped in. And the case itself. Did you see anyone near it besides Mr. Vane? "No one stood out," Dr. Price said. "Just the usual visitors. I was focused on my work." "Thank you, Doctor Price," Miss Marple said, rising. "You've been most helpful. I'm sure your research will continue once we recover the tablet." Dr. Price's eyes flashed with something hope, or perhaps defiance. "I hope so, Miss Marple. That tablet is more than an artifact. It's a piece of history, and I won't rest until it's safe." As Dr. Price left the office, Craddock turned to Miss Marple. "She's intense, isn't she? Almost too intense. Do you think she's hiding something?" Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. "She is passionate, Inspector, and passion can be a powerful motive. She reminds me of a spinster in my village, Miss Godwin, who collected rare coins with such zeal she once locked herself in the village hall to study them overnight. Dr. Price's devotion to the tablet is genuine, but whether it led her to act unwisely, we cannot yet say." They stepped back into the exhibition hall, where the empty case seemed to loom larger with each passing hour. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the smudge in the dust, now joined in her mind by the flickering lights and Dr. Price's unguarded bitterness toward Hargreaves. She recalled the oiled bolt in the back corridor, the disturbed rags, and Dobbs's predictable midnight break. Each detail was a thread, and she sensed they were weaving a pattern, though its shape was still unclear. "Inspector," she said, "we must learn more about this Mr. Vane. His questions about the tablet's value are suggestive, and the flickering lights. Perhaps Mr. Hargreaves can tell us more about the wiring. Small things, you know, can reveal so much." Craddock nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'll have a constable check the electrical system and call Vane in for a talk. What do you make of Dr. Price's alibi? The innkeeper confirms she was at dinner, but after 9:30 she's unaccounted for." "Indeed," Miss Marple said. "An hour or two unaccounted for can be a lifetime in a theft. Like a governess I once knew, who claimed to be in her room but was seen in the garden at midnight, meeting someone she shouldn't. We must keep an eye on Dr. Price's passion. It may lead us to the truth, or it may blind her to it." As they prepared to summon Mr. Vane, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the tablet, small, enough to slip into a pocket, yet heavy with history. Dr. Price's fervour, Hargreaves's nerves, Dobbs's routine, all were pieces of a puzzle, and she knew, with the quiet certainty of one who had solved many such mysteries, that the truth lay in their intersections. For now, she would listen observe, and let the threads of the case guide her to the needle's point. Chapter 6. The Mysterious Visitor. The St. Mary Mead Museum, with its ivy-clad walls and hushed interior, seemed to settle into an uneasy quiet as the morning wore on. The empty glass case in the exhibition hall stood like a mute witness, its lock unblemished, but its purpose betrayed. Miss Jane Marple, her slight figure wrapped in a sensible tweed coat, stood near the case, her eyes lingering on the faint smudge in the dust, a clue that whispered of carelessness or calculation. Inspector Craddock, ever attentive to her insights, had arranged for Mr. Roland Vane, the enigmatic visitor, to be brought to the curator's office for questioning. As they waited, Miss Marple's mind wove through the threads of the case. Hargreaves's nervous tick, Dobbs's predictable routine, Dr. Price's fierce devotion, and now the elusive Mr. Vane, whose presence seemed to cast a shadow of doubt. The office door opened, and Mr. Vane entered, his polished demeanour as striking as his tailored suit. He was a man in his mid-30s, with dark hair slicked back and a smile that gleamed with practised charm. His eyes, a sharp hazel, flicked over the room, taking in Miss Marple and Craddock with a quick, appraising glance. He carried himself with the ease of someone accustomed to being noticed, yet there was a faint tension in his posture, like a cat poised to spring. Miss Marple noted the shine of his shoes, the crispness of his cuffs, and the slight bulge of a pocket, as if he carried something heavier than a handkerchief. "Good morning, Inspector Miss Marple," Vane said, his voice smooth as polished wood. "I heard about the theft. Shocking business. I'm happy to help however I can." He took the offered chair, crossing his legs with a casual grace that reminded Miss Marple of a young man in St. Mary Mead, a certain Mr. Ellis, who had charmed the village with his manners while quietly selling forged paintings. Craddock opened his notebook, his expression neutral but firm. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Vane. You were at the museum yesterday, I understand, and spent some time with the tablet. Can you tell us about your visit?" Vane leaned back, his smile unwavering. "Of course. I'm something of an amateur historian, you see. Love a bit of ancient lore. I was passing through St. Mary Mead on my way to London and heard about the tablet. Thought I'd pop in to have a look. Fascinating piece, isn't it? All those cuneiform squiggles, telling stories of people long gone. I spent an hour or so, maybe, just taking it in." Miss Marple's eyes, mild but piercing, rested on his face. "How delightful, Mr. Vane," she said, her tone as warm as a village tea-party. "It's so rare to meet someone with a passion for history. I knew a gentleman once, a Mr. Carter, who collected Roman coins and could talk for hours about their inscriptions. What was it about the tablet that caught your interest?" Vane's smile flickered, just for a moment, like a candle in a draught. "Oh, it's age mostly. The idea that something so small could survive thousands of years, it's humbling. I asked the curator a few questions, just general things. How they got it, how it's protected, that sort of thing." Craddock's pen paused over his notebook. "You asked about its protection. That's an unusual question for a tourist." Vane shrugged, his smile returning. "Curiosity, Inspector. A piece like that must be worth a fortune. I wondered how a small museum like this keeps it safe. Hargreaves mentioned the alarm system. Quite proud of it, he was." Miss Marple tilted her head, her hands folded neatly over her umbrella. And were you satisfied with its safety, Mr. Vane? Or did you notice anything that seemed less secure?" Her voice was gentle, but her question hung in the air like a delicately cast net. Vane's eyes met hers, and for a fraction of a second she saw a glint of wariness. "It seemed secure enough," he said. "Glass case, lock, alarm light blinking away. I'm no expert, but it looked solid. I left around 4, well before closing, and went back to my guest house." "And last night?" Craddock asked, his tone sharper. "Where were you between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. when the theft was discovered?" Vane's smile didn't falter, but his fingers brushed the edge of his pocket. A gesture so slight Miss Marple might have missed it had she not been watching. "I was out walking," he said. "I like a stroll in the evening, clears the head. St. Mary Mead's a charming place, all those quiet lanes. I was back at Mrs. Pritchard's guest house by 11, I'd say, and turned in for the night." Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. "A walk in the fog," she said, her tone one of innocent surprise. "It was such a damp night, wasn't it?" "I remember a young man in my village, a Mr. Willis, who loved his evening walks, but he always carried a torch to avoid stumbling. Did you find the lanes easy to navigate, Mr. Vane?" Vane chuckled, though it sounded forced. "I manage, Miss Marple. I've a good sense of direction. Didn't see a soul, though. Too foggy for most folks to be out." Craddock made a note, his brow furrowing. "No one saw you then?" "Mrs. Pritchard didn't hear you come in." "She's a sound sleeper," Vane said smoothly. "I let myself in with the key she gives guests. I didn't want to disturb her." Miss Marple nodded, her expression as serene as a Sunday morning. "Of course. It's so considerate to be quiet. Did you speak to anyone else yesterday, perhaps Dr. Price or Mr. Dobbs, about the tablet or the museum?" Vane shook his head. "Not really. Dr. Price was busy with her sketches. Didn't seem keen on chatting. Dobbs just glowered at me when I asked about the tablet's age. I kept to myself mostly, just enjoying the exhibit." "Thank you, Mr. Vane," Miss Marple said, rising with a grace that belied her years. "You've been most cooperative. We shan't keep you longer." As Vane stood, his hand brushed his pocket again, and Miss Marple's eyes followed the movement, though her smile remained unchanged. As Vane left the office, Craddock turned to Miss Marple, his voice low. "He's slippery, isn't he? All charm and no substance. That business about walking in the fog. No alibi, no witnesses. And asking about the tablet's protection. That's not the talk of a casual tourist." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. "He's charming, Inspector, but charm is often a mask. He reminds me of a young man in St. Mary Mead, a Mr. Ellis, who sold forged paintings with such a winning smile that no one suspected him until the paint began to flake. Mr. Vane's interest in the tablet's value is telling. And his pocket. Did you notice how he touched it, as if checking something was still there?" Craddock frowned, glancing at his notes. "I did. You think he's carrying something incriminating?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said. "Or perhaps it's a habit, like a shop girl I knew who always patted her apron pocket where she kept a stolen trinket. We must learn more about Mr. Vane's evening walk, and whether it took him near the museum." They stepped back into the exhibition hall, where the empty case seemed to pulse with the weight of unanswered questions. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the smudge in the dust, now joined in her mind by the flickering lights Dr. Price had mentioned. The oiled bolt in the back corridor, and Vane's evasive alibi. She thought of a travelling salesman who had once passed through St. Mary Mead, charming the village with his tales while quietly casing houses for a burglary. Vane's polish, she suspected, might hide a similar intent. "Inspector," she said, "might we ask Mrs. Pritchard at the guest house about Mr. Vane's comings and goings, and perhaps check the visitor log again? He may have signed in more than once, and repetition can reveal intention." Craddock nodded, signalling a constable to fetch the log. "I'll send someone to the guest house too. What do you make of his story? Too smooth, if you ask me." "Smoothness," Miss Marple said, "is like a polished floor, beautiful until you slip on it. Mr. Vane's story is too neat, too unverified, like a curate I once knew, who claimed to be visiting the sick but was seen at a card game instead. We must see where Mr. Vane's walk really led him." As they waited for the log, Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the tablet, its ancient script now hidden somewhere beyond the museum's walls. Vane's charm, Price's passion, Dobbs's routine, Hargreaves's nerves, all were threads in a tapestry she was beginning to discern. The truth, she knew, was close, waiting for the right tug to unravel it. Chapter 7. A Village Whisper. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the village green of St. Mary Mead, where the museum stood as a quiet sentinel, amidst the chatter of villagers gathered in small knots, their voices buzzing with speculation about the stolen Sumerian tablet. Miss Jane Marple, her tweed coat buttoned against the autumn chill, walked slowly along the cobbled path toward her cottage, her mind a hive of activity despite her serene demeanour. Inspector Craddock had remained at the museum to oversee a constable's examination of the electrical system, prompted by Dr. Price's mention of flickering lights, while Miss Marple had promised to return after a brief respite. The threads of the case, the smudge in the dust, the oiled bolt, the disturbed rags and Mr. Vane's elusive alibi wove through her thoughts like a pattern half-formed, each detail a stitch waiting to be connected. At her cottage, with its neat rose bushes and lace-curtained windows, Miss Marple found Mrs. Dane Calthrop waiting, her usual vivacity tempered by the weight of the morning's events. The vicar's wife sat in the parlour, a tray of tea and scones before her, her eyes bright with the kind of curiosity that thrived on village gossip. "Jane, you must tell me everything," she said, pouring tea with a clatter of china. "The whole village is talking. Mr. Hargreaves is beside himself, and they say Dr. Price nearly fainted when she heard the tablet was gone. And that Mr. Vane, such a charming man, but no one knows a thing about him." Miss Marple settled into her armchair, her knitting needles clicking softly as she took up her pale blue wool. "Gossip, my dear, is like a breeze," she said, her voice gentle but her eyes sharp. "It carries seeds of truth, but one must sift carefully to find them. What has the village been saying about our suspects?" Mrs. Calthrop leaned forward, her teacup forgotten. "Oh, all sorts of things. Young Tommy Pierce, the delivery boy, swears he saw a black car parked near the museum at midnight. Sleek, he said, not like any car from the village. He was out late, sneaking a cigarette behind the post office, so he's not likely to be mistaken. And then there's Mrs. Bunce, who told the baker that Mr. Dobbs was at the Red Lion 2 nights ago, grumbling about his wages, said he deserves more for guarding treasures like that tablet. As for Dr. Price, the innkeeper's wife saw her pacing in the inn's garden after dinner, looking agitated, though she wouldn't say why. Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes narrowing slightly. A black car at midnight. How very interesting. And Mr. Dobbs at the pub. 2 nights ago, you say? Was there anything else about Mr. Vane? Mrs. Calthrop's face lit up. Yes. Mrs. Pritchard, at the guest house, said he made a telephone call last night, around 11:30. She overheard him because her parlour's next to the phone. He was speaking low, but she caught something about arrangements and tomorrow. She thought it odd, him calling so late, but he's such a polite man. She didn't think much of it until the theft. Miss Marple's lips pursed, a sign to those who knew her that a thread had caught her attention. A late-night call, she murmured. How like a young man I knew in St. Mary Mead, who made secretive calls to arrange a deal that wasn't quite honest. And this black car. Tommy Pierce is a reliable boy, isn't he? As reliable as a boy his age can be, Mrs. Calthrop said with a laugh. He's nosy, but he's got sharp eyes. He said the car was gone by the time he cycled home, but it was near the museum's back lane, where the courtyard gate is. Miss Marple nodded, her knitting resuming its steady rhythm. The back lane, near the courtyard, and an oiled bolt on the door there, as I recall. Gossip, you see, can be most illuminating, like the chatter at a church bazaar that once revealed a thief among the stallholders. She thought of a certain Mrs. Lacey, whose loose tongue had inadvertently exposed a pilfered brooch by mentioning a stranger's odd behaviour. What else have you heard, my dear? Anything about Mr. Hargreaves or Dr. Price? Mrs. Calthrop sipped her tea, her eyes gleaming. Well, Mr. Hargreaves was at the council meeting, as you know, but Mrs. Whitfield, the mayor's wife, said he seemed distracted, kept checking his watch. And Dr. Price, there's a rumour she argued with Hargreaves yesterday morning, before the museum opened. The milkman overheard them near the entrance. Something about her wanting more access to the tablet. Hargreaves told her she was monopolizing it, and she snapped back that he didn't understand its importance. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. An argument, you say? How like a parish meeting I once attended, where a disagreement over hymnals hid a deeper resentment. Dr. Price's passion is strong, but passion can lead to rashness. And Mr. Hargreaves's distraction, perhaps he sensed trouble brewing. She set down her knitting, her mind turning over the new threads, the black car, the late-night call, the argument, Dobbs's grumbling. Each was a fragment, like the scattered pieces of a quilt she had once helped a neighbour piece together, revealing a pattern only when viewed as a whole. I think, Miss Marple said, rising, I shall return to the museum. Inspector Craddock will want to hear about this car and Mr. Vane's call, and we must learn more about Dr. Price's movements after dinner. A walk in the inn's garden is harmless enough, but it's the hours after that concern me. Mrs. Calthrop followed her to the door, her curiosity undimmed. Do you think it's one of them, Jane? Or someone from outside, some clever thief who slipped in and out? Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. I think, my dear, that the truth is like a weed in a garden. It grows where you least expect it, but it always leaves a trace. We shall find it with a little patience. Back at the museum, Miss Marple found Craddock in the exhibition hall, speaking with a constable who had examined the electrical system. The constable, a young man with an earnest face, reported that the wiring was indeed old, but no faults were found to explain the flickering lights Dr. Price had mentioned. "Could have been a momentary surge, sir," he said, "but nothing's tampered with, far as I can tell." Craddock thanked him and turned to Miss Marple, his expression one of quiet frustration. "No luck with the wiring, Miss Marple. And the visitor log confirms Vane was here twice in the past week, both times lingering near the tablet. Mrs. Pritchard says he came in late last night, but she can't be sure of the time. Says her clock's not reliable." Miss Marple nodded, sharing the details from Mrs. Calthrop. The black car, Vane's late-night call, Dobbs's pub complaints, and Dr. Price's argument with Hargreaves. Craddock's eyes sharpened at the mention of the car. "A black car near the back lane. That's worth checking. I'll have a constable ask around the village. Someone else might have seen it. And Vane's call, arrangements, was it? Sounds like he's planning something." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. "A call at 11:30 is not the habit of a man with nothing to hide. Like a curate I knew, who made late calls to arrange a gambling debt he didn't want known. We must find out who Mr. Vane was speaking to." Craddock made a note. "I'll get onto the telephone exchange, see if they can trace the call. What about Dr. Price's argument and Dobbs's grumbling?" "Both are suggestive," Miss Marple said. "Dr. Price's passion for the tablet may have made her reckless, and Mr. Dobbs's dissatisfaction could make him vulnerable to persuasion. But the car and the call point to Mr. Vane, I think. We must watch him closely." As they stood in the exhibition hall, the empty case seemed to loom larger, its glass reflecting the dim light like a mirror to the past. Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the smudge in the dust, now joined in her mind by the black car and Vane's secretive call. She thought of a village fete, where a whispered rumour had led her to a pickpocket hiding among the crowd. The truth, she knew, was drawing closer, carried on the whispers of St. Mary Mead. Chapter 8. The Dust Tells a Tale. The St. Mary Mead Museum, with its quiet dignity and ivy-draped walls, seemed to hold secrets in its shadows as the afternoon deepened. The exhibition hall, bathed in the soft glow of slanting sunlight, was dominated by the empty glass case, its lock gleaming with a mocking perfection. Miss Jane Marple stood before it, her eyes drawn once more to the faint smudge in the dust near its base, a mark that had lingered in her thoughts like an unfinished melody. Inspector Craddock, his notebook worn from constant use, stood beside her, his expression a blend of determination and impatience. The threads of the case, Hargreaves's nervous tick, Dobbs's routine, Dr. Price's fervour, Vane's slippery charm, and now the village whispers of a black car and a late-night call, wove a complex pattern in Miss Marple's mind, each detail a clue to the theft of the Sumerian tablet. She bent closer to the smudge, her movements slow and deliberate, her spectacles catching the light. The mark was irregular, not a footprint, but something softer, perhaps the brush of a glove, or a cloth used to handle the case. "Inspector," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "this smudge is most curious. It's not dust displaced by a careless step, but something more intentional. I wonder if it might be talcum powder, the sort one uses to ease a glove or handle delicate objects without leaving prints." Craddock crouched beside her, his eyes narrowing. "Talcum powder, that's a thought. A thief might use it to avoid fingerprints. I'll have the constable take a sample for analysis, but why leave it here, where it could be noticed?" Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. A sign of her mind at work. A small mistake, perhaps. Like a seamstress I knew in St. Mary Mead, who left a trace of chalk on a stolen bolt of silk. The cleverest people often betray themselves with the smallest oversights. She straightened, her gaze sweeping the case once more. The lock, unforced but bearing a faint scratch, caught her attention anew. "This scratch, Inspector. Have you examined it closely?" Craddock peered at the lock, his brow furrowing. "It's barely there, Miss Marple. Could be from normal wear, but I'll have it looked at. You think it's significant?" "Everything is significant until it isn't," she replied, her tone mild but her eyes sharp. "A lock like this, so modern, would require skill to open without a key. I recall a locksmith's apprentice in my village, a young man named Tom, who turned to burglary because he knew how to pick locks without leaving a trace, except once, when he scratched a door frame and gave himself away." Craddock made a note, then gestured to the alarm box beneath the case. "The alarm's another puzzle. Hargreaves swears it was set when he left, and Dobbs saw the light blinking at 10. Yet it was off when Mrs. Bunce arrived. Someone knew the code or how to bypass it." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts turning to the oiled bolt in the back corridor, the disturbed rags and the flickering lights Dr. Price had mentioned. "The alarm is modern, but modern things can be tricked. Like a new telephone exchange in St. Mary Mead, which failed because someone cut a single wire. We must learn how this alarm works, and who might have known its secrets." They moved to the curator's office, where Craddock had arranged for Hargreaves to explain the alarm system. The curator, still pale and twitchy, stood by his desk, his hands wringing a handkerchief as if it might yield answers. "It's a simple system," he said, his voice unsteady. "You enter a 4-digit code to arm or disarm it. The light blinks red when it's active. I set it myself at 10, and it was working. I'm certain of it." Miss Marple's eyes softened, though her question was precise. "And the code, Mr. Hargreaves, where is it kept?" "In my safe," he said, gesturing to a small locked box behind his desk. "Only I know the combination. I change the code monthly, as a precaution. No one else could have accessed it." "Most prudent," Miss Marple said, "but codes can be guessed or seen. I knew a bank clerk once who thought his safe was secure, but a colleague watched him enter the combination and later stole a ledger. Did anyone see you enter the code yesterday?" Hargreaves shook his head vigorously. No, I'm always alone when I set it. Dr. Price was nearby, but she was packing her things. Dobbs was at the front door, and Vane had left hours earlier." Miss Marple nodded, filing away his words. She thought of a grocer in St. Mary Mead, who had been so careful with his till yet failed to notice a customer lingering too close. "And the flickering lights Dr. Price mentioned, did you investigate them?" Hargreaves flushed. "It's the wiring, I'm sure. This building is old, and the electrics play up sometimes. It was just a moment, nothing serious." Craddock exchanged a glance with Miss Marple. "We've checked the wiring, Mr. Hargreaves. No faults found. Could someone have tampered with the power to disable the alarm?" Hargreaves's tic worsened, and he dabbed his forehead. I don't see how. The alarm has a battery backup. Even if the power flickered, it should have stayed on." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. "A battery backup is clever, but clever things can be undone. Like a new sewing machine in my village, which stopped when someone loosened a single screw. We must consider every possibility." They returned to the exhibition hall, where Miss Marple requested the visitor log once more. The constable brought it, and she scanned the pages, noting Vane's bold signature on 2 separate days, each time with a flourish that seemed almost performative. Dr. Price's precise hand appeared daily, while Hargreaves's scrawl marked his routine checks. "Mr. Vane visited twice," she murmured. "Once is curiosity, twice is purpose. Like a young man I knew who visited a shop twice to study its layout before stealing a watch." Craddock nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We've got word from the telephone exchange. Vane's call last night was to a number in London, but they couldn't trace the recipient. Some sort of private exchange. And Tommy Pierce's story about the black car checks out. A farmer saw it too, parked near the back lane around midnight, gone by 1. Miss Marple's lips pursed. A car at midnight, a call to London. These are not the actions of a casual tourist. We must learn more about Mr. Vane's connections. And the smudge. Has the analysis come back?" "Not yet," Craddock said, "but I've asked for it to be rushed. If it's talcum, it could point to someone careful, someone professional." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, "a professional would leave no fingerprints, but talcum is a small slip. Like a thief in my village who used gloves but left a trace of oil from his bicycle chain. We must also consider the flickering lights, perhaps a distraction, or a test of the alarm's backup." As they stood in the hall, the empty case seemed to pulse with secrets, its glass reflecting the fading light. Miss Marple's thoughts turned to the threads of the case. The smudge, now possibly talcum, the oiled bolt, the disturbed rags, Vane's call, the black car. Each was a clue, like the scattered petals of a flower she had once helped a child reassemble into a rose. "Inspector," she said, "we are close to something. The dust is telling its tale, but we must listen carefully." Craddock looked at her, a spark of admiration in his eyes. "You've a way of seeing things, Miss Marple. What's next?" "We must watch Mr. Vane," she said. "His charm is a mask, I think, and his call suggests a plan, like a salesman in St. Mary Mead, who smiled while plotting to cheat his customers. And we must learn more about the alarm's battery. Someone knew how to silence it, and that someone is our thief." As the museum grew quiet, Miss Marple felt the truth drawing nearer, like a shadow sharpening in the light. The dust had spoken, and she was ready to hear its full story. Chapter 9. A trap is set. The St. Mary Mead Museum, with its quiet stone walls and the faint must of old wood, seemed to hold its breath as the day waned. The empty glass case in the exhibition hall, a stark reminder of the theft that had unsettled the village. Miss Jane Marple stood near the case, her eyes tracing the faint smudge in the dust, now confirmed by the constable's analysis as talcum powder, a subtle clue that pointed to a careful hand. The scratch on the lock, the oiled bolt in the back corridor, the disturbed rags, the flickering lights, and the village whispers of a black car. And Mr. Vane's late-night call wove a tapestry in her mind, each thread tightening around a truth she felt was close at hand. Inspector Craddock, his face etched with the strain of a case that defied easy answers, stood beside her, his notebook filled with details that seemed to circle without landing. "Miss Marple," Craddock said, his voice low to avoid the ears of a lingering constable, We've got the talcum powder confirmed, and the telephone exchange traced Vane's call to a private number in London, possibly a dealer or a broker, but they can't pin it down further. The black car's still a mystery. No one's reported it since last night. What's our next move? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly, though her expression remained serene. Sometimes, Inspector, the best way to catch a mouse is to bait the trap. I recall a grocer in St. Mary Mead, Mr. Tuttle, who caught a shoplifter by leaving a tempting jar of sweets where it could be seen but watched. I suggest we do something similar. Let it be known that we've found a clue, something that might unsettle our thief. Craddock raised an eyebrow, intrigued. A ruse? What sort of clue? The talcum powder, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but deliberate. Let it be announced, discreetly, through village channels, that the police have found a glove with talcum residue near the case. It's not true, of course, but it may prompt someone to act, to reveal themselves. A guilty person, you see, is often like a nervous knitter. They drop a stitch when startled. Craddock nodded, a slow smile spreading across his face. Clever. We'll spread the word through Mrs. Bunce and the innkeeper. Gossip travels fast here. If the thief thinks we're closing in, they might panic, make a mistake. Precisely, Miss Marple said. And we must watch our suspects closely. Mr. Vane, Dr. Price, Mr. Dobbs, and even Mr. Hargreaves. Their reactions will tell us much. Like a parish meeting I once attended, where a whispered rumour about missing funds flushed out the culprit by his sudden departure. Craddock sent a constable to spread the rumour, instructing him to mention the glove to Mrs. Bunce and Mr. Willis at the Blue Boar Inn, knowing their tongues would carry the news through St. Mary Mead by evening. Meanwhile, Miss Marple suggested they re-examine the back corridor, where the oiled bolt and disturbed rags had caught her attention. They walked down the narrow passage, its shelves lined with boxed artifacts and cleaning supplies, the air heavy with the scent of polish and dust. The oak door at the end, leading to the courtyard, was still bolted, its bolt gleaming with a faint sheen of oil. Miss Marple paused, her eyes on the bolt. This oil, Inspector, it's fresh, isn't it? Not the sort that accumulates over time. Someone wanted this door to move smoothly, silently. Craddock knelt, inspecting the bolt. You're right, it's too clean, too recent. But the door was bolted from the inside when we arrived, and the key's still in Hargreaves's safe. How could anyone use it? Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly. A bolt can be drawn and replaced, if one has access. I recall a housemaid in my village, a girl named Ellen, who slipped out to meet a suitor by unbolting a door and locking it again before dawn. We must ask Mr. Dobbs if he checked this. Bolt during his rounds, not just the door, but the bolt itself. They returned to the exhibition hall, where Craddock summoned Dobbs. The guard, his scowl as fixed as ever, approached with heavy steps, his boots leaving faint traces of mud but no dust. "What now, Inspector?" he asked, his tone gruff but not defiant. "Mr. Dobbs," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle, "when you checked the back corridor door during your rounds, did you test the bolt itself, or just the door?" Dobbs blinked, caught off guard. "Just the door, ma'am. It was locked like always. I didn't touch the bolt. Why would I? It's always bolted from the inside." Miss Marple nodded, her mind noting the gap in his routine. "Of course, you're very diligent. But routines can be studied, can't they? Like a postman I knew, whose predictable rounds let a thief slip past unnoticed. Dobbs flushed, but before he could respond, a constable entered, his face eager. "Sir, the rumour's out." Mrs. Bunce was shocked about the glove, already told the baker, and Mr. Willis at the inns spreading it to his patrons. "We're watching Vane, Price, and Hargreaves to see how they react." Craddock thanked him, then turned to Miss Marple. "We'll give it a few hours. I've got men at the inn, the guest house, and Hargreaves is home. If anyone makes a move, we'll know." Miss Marple's eyes drifted to the empty case, its glass catching the fading light. "We must also consider the black car, Inspector. If it was near the courtyard at midnight, it suggests an accomplice, someone waiting to receive the tablet. Mr. Vane's call to London. Arrangements, Mrs. Calthrop said. It's possible he was coordinating with someone outside." Craddock nodded, his expression grim. "I've asked the local police to check for similar cars in nearby towns. And we're digging into Vane's background. His story about being a tourist doesn't hold up. No record of him at any historical societies, and his address in London is a boarding house he left weeks ago." Miss Marple's smile was faint but knowing. A man with no roots is often a man with a purpose. Like a travelling salesman in St. Mary Mead who claimed to be passing through but was planning a theft. We must be ready for Mr. Vane to act, especially if he believes the glove story. By evening, the trap bore fruit. Craddock received a call from a constable stationed at Mrs. Pritchard's guest house. "Sir, Vane left in a hurry after hearing about the glove from a neighbour. He's headed toward the back lane, near the museum's courtyard. I'm tailing him, but he's meeting someone, a man in a black car." Craddock's eyes lit up. "Good work! Keep him in sight, but don't engage. We're on our way." He turned to Miss Marple, who was already gathering her coat. "Looks like your trap's working, Miss Marple. Care to join me?" "I wouldn't miss it," she said, her voice calm but her eyes alight with anticipation. They hurried to Craddock's car, driving through the quiet lanes of St. Mary Mead to the back of the museum, where the courtyard gate stood hidden by overgrown hedges. The constable met them, pointing to a shadowy figure, Vane, standing beside a sleek black car, speaking in low tones to a man in a dark coat. Craddock signalled his men to approach quietly, and Miss Marple watched from the car, her sharp eyes noting Vane's nervous gestures, the way he patted his pocket as he had in the office. The constable's radio crackled softly, reporting that Vane had handed something small to the man, who slipped it into a briefcase. "That's it, sir," the constable whispered. "Looks like the tablet." Craddock's men moved in, detaining Vane and his contact before they could flee. A search of the briefcase revealed nothing, but a hidden compartment in Vane's suitcase, found later at the guest house, was dusted with talcum powder. Empty, but a damning clue. Miss Marple's trap had worked, stirring Vane to act and revealing his connection to the theft. As Vane was led away, protesting his innocence, Miss Marple turned to Craddock. "The dust told its tale, Inspector, and Mr. Vane added it to the final chapter. Like a boy in my village who thought he could outrun suspicion, but tripped over his own haste." The truth was close now, and Miss Marple knew the tablet was within reach, hidden by a man whose charm had been his undoing. Chapter 10. The Confession. The evening air in St. Mary Mead carried a chill, as the lights of the village flickered on, casting a soft glow over the cobbled lanes. The museum, now a hub of police activity, buzzed with a quiet intensity, as Inspector Craddock's men processed the scene at the back lane, where Mr. Roland Vane and his contact had been apprehended. Miss Jane Marple sat in the curator's office, her hands folded neatly over her umbrella, her eyes calm but alert, like a watcher at the edge of a storm. The empty glass case in the exhibition hall, with its faint smudge of talcum powder and scratched lock, had led them here, to a moment where the threads of the case, Hargreaves's nerves, Dobbs's routine, Dr. Price's fervour, and Vane's slippery charm, were finally knitting together. Vane sat across from Craddock and Miss Marple, his polished demeanour fraying at the edges. His tailored suit was slightly rumpled from the scuffle, and his hazel eyes, once gleaming with confidence, darted nervously between the inspector and the elderly lady whose gentle questions had somehow cornered him. The black car and its driver, a man named Carter, with a known history of dealing in illicit antiquities, had been detained, but the tablet was not in the briefcase. Only papers and a false bottom that suggested something had been hidden. The real clue lay in Vane's suitcase, where the hidden compartment dusted with talcum powder pointed to his guilt like a silent accusation. Craddock leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "Mr. Vane, we've got you meeting a known dealer in stolen goods. A hidden compartment in your suitcase and talcum powder matching the smudge by the case. You were seen near the museum at midnight, and your late-night call to London mentioned arrangements. It's time to talk. Where's the tablet?" Vane's smile, once so effortless, was now a strained grimace. "Inspector, you're mistaken. I'm just a tourist, interested in history. That car, I was only asking for directions. The talcum powder, I use it for shaving, keeps my hands dry. You've got nothing solid on me." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly, her expression as serene as a Sunday afternoon. "Oh, Mr. Vane," she said, her voice soft but carrying a weight that made him shift in his seat. "You remind me so much of a young man in my village, a Mr. Ellis, who sold forged paintings with such charm that no one suspected him until the paint began to flake. You see, it's not the big things that betray us, but the small ones, like a smudge of talcum, or a call made too late at night. Why don't you tell us the truth? It's so much simpler in the end." Vane's jaw tightened, and he looked away, his fingers brushing the pocket where he had so often patted during their earlier meeting. Miss Marple noted the gesture, recalling a shop girl in St. Mary Mead who had touched her apron pocket in just the same way, hiding a stolen locket until the habit gave her away. "That pocket of yours, Mr. Vane," she said gently. "Is there something you're checking for? Something you handed to Mr. Carter, perhaps?" Vane's eyes flashed with defiance, but the weight of the evidence was pressing. Craddock leaned in, his tone harder now. "We've got Carter talking, Vane. He says you promised him something valuable, something small enough to fit in a briefcase. The tablet, wasn't it? You knew Dobbs's routine. You knew the alarm could be bypassed. You were at the museum twice, studying the setup. Stop wasting our time." Vane's composure cracked, his hands clenching into fists. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low but trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I'm not a thief, not really." Miss Marple tilted her head, her voice as soothing as a lullaby. "Of course you didn't, Mr. Vane. Most people don't set out to be thieves. They see an opportunity, a temptation, like a boy in my village who took apples from a neighbour's tree because he thought no one was watching. but someone always is, you know. Tell us what happened. It will be easier for you." Vane slumped in his chair, the fight draining from him. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "All right, I took it. The tablet. I've got debts, you see. Bad ones. A man in London, a collector, offered a fortune for it. Said he'd pay enough to clear my slate and more. I saw the tablet in the papers read about the museum's big unveiling. I came here to see it, to figure out if it was possible." Craddock's pen moved swiftly across his notebook. "Go on. How did you do it?" Vane rubbed his face, his charm gone. "I've picked up a few tricks over the years, locks, alarms, that sort of thing. I visited the museum twice, watched Dobbs's rounds, timed his break. He's like clockwork, midnight every night in the back room. I saw Hargreaves set the alarm once, caught a glimpse of the code when he thought I wasn't looking. The lights flickering that day, Dr. Price mentioned it. It was me testing the power. The alarm's battery backup is weak, cuts out if you short the system briefly. I came back at midnight, used a skeleton key on the front door, shorted the alarm, and picked the case lock. Used talcum on my gloves to keep them from sticking, took the tablet and was out in 10 minutes. Miss Marple nodded, her expression unchanged, but her mind fitting the pieces together. And the smudge, Mr. Vane, the talcum by the case. Vane's eyes widened slightly, as if surprised she had noticed. I must have brushed the floor when I was working the lock. I thought I was careful, but I was in a hurry. And the tablet? Craddock pressed. Where is it now? Vane hesitated, his gaze dropping. I handed it to Carter tonight, in the lane. He was supposed to take it to the buyer in London. You caught us before he could leave. Craddock signalled a constable, who hurried out to search Carter's car. Miss Marple's eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. You see, Mr. Vane, it's the small things that matter. Like a curate in my village who thought he could hide a gambling debt, but his nervous glances gave him away. You planned so carefully, but the talcum and the call betrayed you. The constable returned, holding a small cloth-wrapped bundle. He unwrapped it to reveal the Sumerian tablet, its cuneiform script intact, its surface unharmed. Hargreaves, who had been hovering anxiously outside, gasped and rushed forward, his hands trembling as he took it. It's safe! Oh, thank heaven! Craddock turned to Vane, his expression grim. You're under arrest, Vane. You and Carter will have a lot to answer for. As Vane was led away, his head bowed. Miss Marple rose, her umbrella tapping lightly on the floor. A sad business, Inspector, she said. He thought he could outwit us all. But greed, you know, is a poor planner. Like a young man in St. Mary Mead, who stole a silver spoon and thought no one would notice. But someone always does. Craddock smiled, a mix of relief and admiration. Your trap worked, Miss Marple. That glove story flushed him out. How did you know he'd act? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. People with secrets are like birds startled by a sudden noise. They fly before they think. Mr. Vane's call, his visits, his questions about the tablet's value, they were all signs of a man with a plan. The talcum was the final thread, and it led us to him. As the museum quieted, the tablet returned to its case. Miss Marple felt the case drawing to a close. The truth had emerged as it always did, from the small overlooked details that only patience could uncover. Chapter 11. The Threads Unravelled. The St. Mary Mead Museum, bathed in the soft glow of evening lamps, seemed to exhale as the Sumerian tablet was returned to its glass case, its cuneiform script gleaming faintly under the restored security of a newly checked lock. The exhibition hall, so recently a scene of scandal, now held a quiet triumph, though the air still carried the weight of questions answered and truths revealed. Miss Jane Marple sat in the curator's office, her hands folded over her umbrella, her eyes serene but sharp as she sipped a cup of tea brought by a grateful Mr. Hargreaves. Inspector Craddock stood by the desk, his notebook closed at last, his face a mix of relief and quiet awe at the elderly lady whose gentle probing had unravelled the theft. The arrest of Mr. Roland Vane and his accomplice, Mr. Carter, had sent a ripple through the village, with whispers of the drama already spreading from the Blue Boar Inn to the village green. The tablet recovered from Carter's car in its cloth wrapping was unharmed, and Hargreaves's nervous tic had eased, though his hands still trembled as he adjusted the case's alarm. Miss Marple, however, knew that the case was not fully closed until the threads of motive and method were laid bare, like a quilt spread out to show its pattern. "Miss Marple," Craddock said, leaning against the desk, "you've done it again. That trap with the glove was a stroke of genius. Vane might have slipped away if he hadn't panicked and met Carter. But I'd like to hear how you pieced it together, every step if you don't mind." Miss Marple set down her teacup, her smile as gentle as a summer breeze. "It's all in the small things, Inspector, as I've often said. Like a shawl I once knitted, where a single dropped stitch could unravel the whole if you didn't catch it in time. Let me explain how the threads came together." She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady and clear. "From the start, the smudge in the dust by the case caught my eye. It wasn't a footprint, but something softer, more deliberate. When the constable confirmed it was talcum powder, I thought of a thief using it to ease gloves or handle the lock without leaving prints. It's a trick I've heard of before, used by a burglar in St. Mary Mead who left a similar trace on a windowsill. That smudge pointed to someone careful, someone practiced, not Mr. Dobbs, whose boots carried only mud, nor Dr. Price, whose passion was too fervent for such subtlety." Craddock nodded, his eyes intent. "And the scratch on the lock?" "Exactly," Miss Marple said. "The lock was unforced, but that tiny scratch suggested a skilled hand, someone who knew how to pick it quietly. I recalled a locksmith's apprentice in my village, a young man who turned to theft because he could open any door. Mr. Vane's questions about the tablet's value, his 2 visits to the museum, and his vague alibi of a midnight walk all pointed to him. Like a salesman I knew, who cased a shop under the guise of buying, Mr. Vane was studying the museum's weaknesses." She paused, her eyes drifting to the window, where the village lights twinkled. "Then there was the oiled bolt in the back corridor, the disturbed rags, and the flickering lights Dr. Price mentioned. These were not accidents. The bolt suggested someone planned to use the courtyard door, silently. The rags hinted at a clean-up or concealment. The lights, I suspected, were a test. Mr. Vane admitted he shorted the power to disable the alarm's battery backup. It was clever, but not clever enough to avoid leaving traces." Craddock rubbed his chin. "And Dobbs's routine? You thought someone used his midnight break?" "Indeed," Miss Marple said. "Mr. Dobbs is a man of habit, like a gardener I knew who took his tea at the same hour every day, letting a poacher slip past. Vane watched him, timed his break, and struck when he was in the back room. The alarm code, glimpsed when Hargreaves set it, gave Vane his chance. He was quick, 10 minutes, he said, to enter, steal, and leave. "What about Hargreaves and Dr. Price?" Craddock asked. "You suspected them at first, didn't you?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Oh, yes. Mr. Hargreaves's nerves made me wonder if he was hiding something, but it was only his fear of blame. Like a vicar I knew who trembled when questioned about a missing collection plate, though he was innocent. His distress was genuine, his only fault trusting the alarm too much. Dr. Price's passion was intense, and her argument with Hargreaves raised questions, but it was the passion of a scholar, not a thief. She reminded me of a spinster who hoarded rare books, guarding them fiercely but never stealing. Her alibi, though weak after 9:30, held no trace of guile. Craddock smiled, and the black car, the phone call, those sealed it. "Precisely," Miss Marple said. "The car at midnight, seen by young Tommy Pierce, suggested an accomplice. Vane's call to London, overheard by Mrs. Pritchard, spoke of arrangements, a plan to pass the tablet to Carter. When we spread the rumour of the glove, Vane acted, just as a nervous boy in my village once fled when he thought his theft was discovered. His meeting with Carter was his undoing." Craddock shook his head, marvelling. "You saw it all, Miss Marple, from a smudge in the dust to a thief's confession. I'd have been chasing shadows without you." Miss Marple's smile was modest. "It's only a matter of looking closely, Inspector. People are much the same, whether in St. Mary Mead or a great city. Their mistakes, their habits, their fears, they leave traces, like footprints in a garden. You need only follow them." Hargreaves entered, his face flushed with relief. "Miss Marple, Inspector, I can't thank you enough. The tablet is back, and I've ordered a new alarm system, top of the line. This won't happen again." Miss Marple nodded kindly. "I'm sure it won't, Mr. Hargreaves, but do keep an eye on your locks. Even the best can be picked by a determined hand." As they left the office, the museum settling into its quiet rhythm, Miss Marple felt the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. The tablet was safe, Vane and Carter were in custody, and the threads of the case had formed a clear pattern at last. She thought of a quilt she had once helped a neighbour finish, its patches chaotic until the final stitch brought them together. The truth, she knew, was always there, waiting for patience to reveal it. Chapter 12. The Tablet Restored. The village of St. Mary Mead awoke to a crisp autumn morning. Its lanes bathed in a golden light that softened the edges of the previous day's drama. The museum, once a hub of whispers and suspicion, stood quietly on the village green, its ivy-clad walls serene now that the Sumerian tablet was back in its glass case, secured by a newly installed alarm system that Mr. Hargreaves had personally overseen. The scandal of the theft, though still a topic of eager conversation at the Blue Boar Inn and the village shop, was settling into the rhythm of local law, a tale to be recounted over tea and scones for years to come. Miss Jane Marple, seated in her cosy parlour with its chintz curtains and polished mahogany, took up her knitting. The click of her needles a steady counterpoint to the quiet satisfaction she felt at the case's resolution. Mrs. Dane Calthrop, ever the bearer of village news, arrived promptly at 10, her eyes bright with the afterglow of excitement. Jane, you're a marvel, she exclaimed, settling into an armchair with a cup of tea. The whole village is talking about how you caught that dreadful Mr. Vane. They say he's confessed everything, and the tablet's safe. Tell me, how did you know it was him? Miss Marple's smile was gentle, her hands moving deftly with the pale blue wool. It was a matter of seeing the pattern, my dear, she said, her voice as soft as the morning light. People are much the same everywhere, you know. They leave traces of their intentions like footprints in a garden. Mr. Vane's charm, his questions about the tablet's value, his late-night call, they were all signs of a man with a purpose, like a young man in St. Mary Mead who once planned a theft while smiling at everyone he met. Mrs. Calthrop leaned forward. Her teacup forgotten. But the talcum powder, Jane, that was the key, wasn't it? How clever of you to notice it. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled faintly. The talcum was a small thing, but small things matter. Like a smudge of flour on a baker's apron that once revealed he'd been in a pantry he shouldn't have. The smudge by the case, the scratch on the lock, the oiled bolt, they told a story of care and cunning, but also of haste. Mr. Vane thought he was clever, but he forgot that even the cleverest plans leave a trace. She paused, her needles clicking softly. Mr. Hargreaves's nerves were real, but they were the nerves of a man afraid of blame, not guilt. Dr. Price's passion was for knowledge, not possession. Though her unguarded hours after dinner made me wonder for a moment. Mr. Dobbs's routine was his weakness, but he was no thief, only predictable, like a gardener I knew whose tea breaks let a poacher slip by. It was Mr. Vane who wove the plan, using Dobbs's midnight break, the alarm's weak battery, and a skeleton key to steal the tablet for a buyer in London. Mrs. Calthrop shook her head, marvelling. And that trap you set, the glove with talcum. It flushed him out like a startled pheasant. Miss Marple nodded, her expression serene. A guilty mind is like a tangled skein of wool, my dear. Tug at the right thread, and it unravels. Mr. Vane heard of the glove and feared he'd been seen, so he rushed to meet his accomplice, Mr. Carter. Like a boy in my village who ran when he thought his theft was discovered, only to trip over his own haste. At the museum, Mr. Hargreaves had regained his composure, his nervous tic all but gone, as he oversaw the installation of a new security system, complete with a reinforced lock and a more robust alarm. He had visited Miss Marple's cottage the previous evening, his gratitude effusive. "Miss Marple, I owe you everything," he had said, clutching the tablet's catalogue entry as if it were a talisman. "The museum's reputation is saved, and we're planning a new exhibition to draw visitors. I've learned my lesson. No more trusting to old systems." Dr. Evelyn Price, too, had returned to her work, her sharp eyes softened by relief as she resumed her sketches of the tablet's inscriptions. She had thanked Miss Marple with a rare warmth, admitting her argument with Hargreaves had been born of frustration, not malice. "I only wanted more time with it," she confessed. "It's a piece of history, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing it." Miss Marple had smiled, thinking of a spinster in St. Mary Mead, who guarded her rare books with similar zeal, her passion a virtue rather than a vice. Mr. Dobbs, gruff as ever, had accepted a small raise from Hargreaves, mollified by the museum's renewed commitment to security. "Won't catch me napping again," he muttered. though Miss Marple suspected his midnight breaks would continue, as predictable as the church clock. She had seen such men before, loyal but set in their ways, like a farmer who always ploughed the same furrow. As Mrs. Calthrop sipped her tea, Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the tablet itself, its ancient script de Kig, reminder of human greed and ingenuity across millennia. "It's curious, isn't it," she said, "how a small piece of clay can stir such trouble. But then people have always coveted what is rare, whether it's a tablet or a silver spoon. The trick is to see the traces they leave behind." Mrs. Calthrop laughed, setting down her cup. "You make it sound so simple, Jane. The village will be talking about this for years. Miss Marple and the stolen tablet. What's next for you? Another mystery?" Miss Marple's needles clicked on, her smile enigmatic. "Oh, I shall return to my knitting, I expect." But mysteries have a way of finding one, don't they? Like weeds in a garden, they spring up when you least expect. For now, St. Mary Mead is quiet, and that's enough. As Mrs. Calthrop left, promising to spread the tale of Miss Marple's triumph, the elderly lady gazed out her window at the village green, where the museum stood as a quiet testament to order restored. The tablet was safe, its secrets preserved, and the truth had emerged, as it always did, from the small overlooked details that only patience could uncover. St. Mary Mead settled back into its gentle rhythm, but Miss Marple knew, with the certainty of one who had seen many such dramas, that another would come in time. Until then, her needles clicked, and the village hummed, and all was well.